Hello, everybody. Welcome to Friends of the Force. I'm your host, Sarah.
And I'm your host, Brad.
And on today's episode, we are bringing you an interview with none other than Temptation of the Force's author, Tessa Gratton, about this book that we have been anticipating for over a year, essentially since the title was announced. And we have been so excited to, one, read the book, and two, talk with Tessa about it. So we are so grateful that we have not only been able to, one, read the book, but two, talk with Tessa about it.
Yeah, and this is our second time having Tessa on the podcast. So they're officially a Friends of the Force two-timer. Last time she was on the show was for Tales of Light and Life, with the short story A Closed Fist Has No Claws last summer. So I would definitely go check out that interview either before or after this one. It is a great one. Tessa's work has been some of our favorite in the High Republic, stuff that we are going to look back on years from now and reflect on and reminisce on and wish we could read again for the very first time, because it's that good. It's that damn good. And getting to not only talk light spoilers on this podcast episode, but we do also dive into heavy, major spoilers later in the interview, which we will notate the timestamp in our description. That was also a joy. And it was her first time as well getting to talk about spoilers. So she was pretty excited. And I can't wait to share this with you all. It's a great one.
Yes. So without further ado, let's jump into our interview with Tessa Gratton.
Tessa, welcome to Friends of the Force. We're happy to have you now as a second timer, because once again, you're in the High Republic universe, writing yet another great story for us. So thank you so much for joining us on the pod today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I am not yet tired of talking about Temptation of the Force.
Neither are we. So let's go.
I feel like as soon as this book was announced, I was like, I can't wait to get Tessa on the podcast to talk about this. And here we are. It feels like so long ago that this was announced. And just starting with, I guess, having this book in readers' hands now, how do you feel, especially amongst the crazy weeks that High Republic fans have had with The Acolyte, your book coming out the day the third episode of The Acolyte is out? It's just a whole range of emotions, I'm sure.
It is. I am really excited that I can talk about it now, and I can reference things and people will have had a chance to actually dig into it. That said, for publishing, this all happened really, really fast for me. Star Wars publishing is a lot faster than I'm used to, and the High Republic in particular feels like it is just constantly in motion because of how many stories we're all telling simultaneously and how often we talk about it. So even if I'm not actively drafting a book, I'm still on these meetings every other week. And so for me, it really doesn't feel like it was a long time ago that this book was announced. It feels like it was only a few weeks ago, even though I was writing it this time last year. So it has been a while since I started working on it. It's just a very almost disorienting process in a lot of ways because of the interconnection and the dynamic way that we are trying to tell this really elaborate, co-developed, co-written, massive story.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it's happening in this, where the fan culture and all the creators and authors are working on it and are experiencing it kind of at the same time, obviously with a bit of delay. But I remember a post I just saw recently where I think Charles Soule had tweeted that he was like working on the last book and writing some different POV chapters. It's like, whoa, it's all happening all around us all the time.
It sure is. No pressure, Charles.
I think I'd be overwhelmed if I were him right about now, but I trust him. I believe in him. He's got this. He's great. For those readers who haven't yet dived into this book, and what would you say is the type of Star Wars flavor that this book offers that might be unique from other High Republic offerings?
I was explicitly told when I was developing the story and structure and points of view I was going to use that this book was supposed to feel like The Empire Strikes Back, which was pressure. That was like a lot of pressure, Gratton. because that's one of my favorite movies, and it was my parents' favorite movie. And, since before I was born, basically. And I hope that I achieved a lot of that, like the interweaving stories and the heroes in different places, but all ultimately working toward the same kind of thing with like self discovery and a love story really at the center of it. Many love stories, I should say. And so I hope that I managed to bring like Empire Strikes Back um, feels to this particular High Republic book.
This book has so much to offer. Last time we had you on the podcast, we jokingly asked you, is this book going to have temptation? Is it going to have the Force? We're happy to confirm, yes. both
Yes.
are indeed in the book.
Yes.
But all jokes aside, Temptation of the Force is such a, I don't know, it's like a title that you hear it and you're like, oh, okay, your ears perk up a little bit. Like, what do you feel is the essence of that title as it relates to some of the central characters of this book? And I think specifically, and you alluded to it, one of the romances being Elzar and Avar, and we've seen for so long in phase 1 and into phase 3 that pining and that push and pull. Like, what were you really trying to get at with that title?
I think that it really is indicative of how much choice is a part of the book and a part of Star Wars in general, and the role of the Jedi, and the part of what the Jedi have always represented, whether they are a living order with thousands of members or completely eradicated and only a myth, is this idea of choosing the light or the dark, or being tempted toward the dark. Like, there's usually an assumption that everyone starts off toward the light at least, and then is tempted to the dark side. We don't really talk about people being tempted to the light, and I kind of wanted to play with that a little bit, and how there is a pull in not just both directions, because I don't like binaries, but in many directions. So it's not just about yes or no and right or wrong, or light and dark, but like how far is too far, how close is too close, like that kind of thing. And I really tried to put some kind of pull into all of the characters that I could. Like, they're all being pulled or tempted toward different things, usually some kind of representation of love, though not necessarily, like in Markian's example, there's not a lot of love in that guy anymore. Maybe there used to be. But, like with Burry, I do think he is a couple of times, but one time in particular, really tempted, like almost with his own really subtle kind of hubris, like his pride. I can do this, even though it's obvious that he can't do this. But he still is like, I have to try. I know I can do it. And, that is a temptation too, to give into that. And if he had a vague spoiler, I guess, it is something that would pull him toward losing himself, losing his connection to himself and the Force. So there's really a lot of that everywhere, a lot of that kind of temptation, which was nice to be able to lean into.
It's probably my favorite thing through this book, because I was like, oh my gosh, Avar and Elzar, incredible, amazing, love everything about them. Have been thinking about them for years, and now here they are. But also, you seeing all these different point of view characters, and Burry did stand out to me throughout this book. And Brad and I were going to talk about it in depth in our discussion podcast, I have no doubt, about Burry's role in this story. So I know I'm teasing things that we're not talking about in this moment. Sorry to everybody. But yeah, no, I thought that was really wonderful in this story. We had you on for Close Fist Has No Claws. We've also read your other High Republic works. And in what way did your prior High Republic stories prepare you for taking on this big mainline adult novel? And how was the writing experience, different in ways that were either rewarding or challenging or anywhere in between?
Sure. The basic differences were there were even more cooks in the kitchen because the adult books have different and additional editors involved, which really worked out for me. I had a great editorial relationship with Tom at Random House Worlds. We worked together really well, and he helped me untangle a lot of the structural things I was trying to do and smooth things out, and really made me earn a couple of scenes, and I really appreciated that. And then the other major difference is, aside from Quest for Planet X, which is like a really straightforward 40,000 word middle grade adventure, I had to do it all by myself. Because my young adult books, of course, I wrote with Justina, and the biggest benefit of co-writing a book is you only have to do half of the work. But this one was like all on me when it came to the actual writing. And of course, this was the first High Republic book I wrote where essentially all of the characters I didn't create at all. Only Care Santeca, that's the only point of view character in this book who I invented. Everybody else comes from the mind of a different one of these of the High Republic writers, and in some cases, like Burry and Avar and Elzar, they've been written by a lot of other writers before I even joined on, because I was not involved in phase one, which is where so much of the groundwork for what's happening in phase three was laid, and the characterizations and the promises. I mean, like, the promises made about Avar and Elzar were done before I got a say in anything. So it was just like being handed these really developed characters who had a really long and messy, maybe sordid history, and so that was now mine to further untangle and then like start to finish off, because this is the penultimate adult book, and so I really had to bring a lot of things to not quite a close, but the precipice right before the grand finale, basically. And that was very different from writing Path of Deceit, where most of the characters I had a hand in creating. The way that was done was, it was the first book to come out for phase two. So Justina and I got to do a lot of the initial development and characterization of everyone, and we were in control of a lot more. And with Defy the Storm, most of the characters from that had only really been in Out of the Shadows. So they were pretty much Justina's in general. And also I could just be like, oh, Justina, help me with this. Let's do this together. So that was the biggest difference in Temptation of the Force, is I was jumping into several deep ends at once and trying to swim.
It's been so fascinating watching your High Republic journey and the way that your stories continue to iterate upon each other, and small things that maybe appeared once now, coming back to the forefront, and especially like Closed Fist Has No Claws. Like that was our book of the year. We're going to call it book of the year. That was our book of the year last year.
Our short story, the book of the year.
Yeah.
We're just giving it the book of the year title. But you're actually the first High Republic author to have back-to-back novels going from young adult to adults across waves, which is pretty fascinating. And I think in the process of writing Defy the Storm, how were you trying to think ahead, and like what sort of story threads were you the most excited to continue, knowing that you would head into Temptation of the Force with some of those characters like Care and like Vernestra?
For the most part, I tried not to worry too much about that, because we needed Defy the Storm to be its own piece. And it really needed to be, if it was going to be leading into anything directly, it needed to be George's next YA. Because we're supposed to keep them like kind of arcing, like the adult books arc specifically and the YAs arc specifically. And so I tried not to really be pointing too many things in the direction of temptation because of that. But that said, I knew that in temptation, I was going to be dealing directly with getting across the storm wall regularly and the blight. And we basically, the point of Defy the Storm is to create a way for the Jedi to get back and forth across the storm wall. Like that was our assignment plot wise for Defy the Storm. And the reason that was our assignment was because we needed it for temptation, essentially. And then we got to introduce the blight because it needed to be hinted at and introduced, so it wasn't this huge thing out of nowhere in temptation. And so it was really mostly plot that I was thinking about pulling through to temptation. And I love Xylan Graff so much. Since I met him in Out of the Shadows, I was like, oh, Justina didn't know she wrote this character for me. She thought she was writing Jordana for me. But it turns out it was Xylan. And so that's why he's in Defy the Storm, because I was like, please, Justina, please, let's use him. I swear I can make it great. And I also knew I needed some comic relief basically for temptation. Like I hadn't really developed much of temptation yet. But I knew it was going to be a lot of intense, heavy things because of the nature of the, penultimate book. And also they told me Empire Strikes Back. And so I was like, well, anytime Xylan lights up the room for good or ill, he just is this big, bright thing. And I always enjoy writing him. And I can just have like some fun with that. So I was like, I got to figure out a way to get Xylan into this book. And so that's why Care exists, so that I can bridge all of those things and also bring one character that I created into temptation. So there was at least one little pin that's just a Tessa Gratton pin for those characters. Did I answer the question? I forgot what the question was.
Yes.
Connections
totally
between Defy the Storm and temptation. That was a really busy time in my life.
I believe it. It worked out in terms of Care and Xylan, because boy, do I love both of them throughout both of these books. And
I'm
there's
really
one
glad.
moment towards the end of this book, or in the back, 25% of this book or so, where Xylan does the most silent thing possible for Care. And I'm like, God, I love them. So messy. Perfect.
Yeah. So messy. Perfect. Exactly. And, I did want to have a different kind of love story. Xylan and Care are not quite like a foil so directly for Avar and Elzar, but they do also have a messy relationship, and they treat each other in a way that I view as similar to how Avar and Elzar used to, where the actual affection between them is very downplayed and they pretend it's not there. And for Xylan and Care, for the most part, that actually works for them because it's really only about them. Whereas for Avar and Elzar, it doesn't work for them because there are all these external reasons why it can't work for them. And so part of their process in temptation is learning to stop doing that and be like, either we have love and affection for each other and it just has to be out in the open, because secrets are what actually are bad for Jedi. Not love, it's secrets.
Yeah, we've seen where that can go wrong for sure. It's always in the back of our minds when we're reading these stories.
Yeah.
But I do love Xylan. He really radiates the Axel Greylark energy of phase 2. At least in my mind. So
somebody
I'm
has to
glad
do
that
it.
yeah, somebody's got to take up the mantle of Chaos Prince,
Yeah.
as Zoraida would put it.
Mhm.
And kind of those two relationships, Avar, Elzar, and Xylan and Care. I do love a moment between Elzar and Xylan when they're talking about why they want to get back to Naboo so much. And I thought that was like a really poetic moment of just like kind of showing the subtlety of that love. But you mentioned George, and I think that's important because in your acknowledgments, you told him, "I'll write a sequel to anything you start." And it didn't hit me in the head until you said it moments ago. Not only are you picking up the baton from him passing it to you with Eye of Darkness, but now you're passing the baton back to him in YA from Defy to Tears of the Name or Fear, Tears of the Nameless. So it's funny how that that kind of worked out for you both. But like with Eye of Darkness in mind, like what were you most excited to continue that George teed up for you, just story wise?
The two main things were, of course, Avar in particular, but Avar and Elzar, because the two books really don't work without each other. You have, for this kind of story, you have to have the apart time, like the physical distance, literally trapped apart from each other in order for the coming together to be as impactful as it needed to be. And I think George did a fantastic job. He really made Avar in particular so much easier for me in Temptation because basically she was already where I needed her to be at the end of Eye of Darkness. She went through it. She came to terms with her relationship to the Force and like went through her own crucible and then was able to start out Temptation in a pretty confident place, even though it's nowhere that she would have expected herself to want to be, like leadership wise and goal wise, and where she fits into the Jedi Order. But she is, and George did that. And he also did a really great job, like really drawing out Elzar's pining, which was fantastic. And using, we both leaned a lot on the very small scenes that Charles wrote in the Shadows of Starlight. I don't remember which volume it was, but the Avar and Elzar one, of course. What they were both doing and going through in that, which is, compared to Eye of Darkness and Temptation of the Force, extremely short, but there was still so many like meaningful little moments, both visually and in like dialogue, that it really almost already feels like a trilogy to me, without even counting Trials. So I think that's funny. And then the other thing that I was actually really looking forward to developing further was the Gira politics. There were a couple of scenes in Eye of Darkness that, like, I knew what was going to happen because I'd read the very detailed outlines. And, we all talk about this stuff constantly. But when I actually read a couple of the conversations between Markian and Gira about the politics and their maneuvering, and Gira's in particular, I was like, this is great. This is awesome. I cannot wait to dig even more into Gira when it's sort of, she's completely separate from Markian in Temptation, but mirroring in some ways how Avar and Elzar are separated in Eye of Darkness. And so that is not to say that, I mean, their relationships are anything alike, but like physically, as we're trying to like sort of partner in this endeavor. And so this is like the book where Gira is separate from the Nile. Like she basically has nothing directly to do with them, but she's still representing them. and, trying to get what she wants and tease that apart was really exciting. I do like politics quite a bit. I mean, politics are terrible. It's the worst invention of humanity, but I like writing about them.
Yeah. Star Wars politics versus politics in our life. Star Wars politics, much more intriguing and fascinating.
I've got a political science degree and I'm like, ooh, let me read this really interesting study. And then I look around me and I'm like, oh, unfortunate. I hate it here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I do love to read about my Star Wars politics for sure, if nothing else. So I was really glad to see that. And she kind of straddles this line between representing the Nile, wanting her own thing, but also having to, speak for the Nile's actions and speak for Martian's actions in a way that definitely makes her a little uncomfortable because it doesn't align with her goals, which is a really interesting thing to watch her do when she's talking to, Lena So and trying to figure out her place in the galaxy. So love it. Love it. Glad to see it. I have the most niche question, and I'm apologizing in advance. And if you don't have an answer for it, that's fine too, because it's incredibly niche. But in July 2023, you tweeted something that I literally think about all the time, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But you tweeted, "Not me writing Elzar Man POV to Shiny's new album." Okay. This messed me up. This is the greatest tweet I've ever read. I'm so sorry. Firstly,
I tweeted it. It's my fault.
Firstly, everybody should listen to this
I've had to suffer for it. I'm just kidding.
It's true. It's true. He continues to be my friend despite the annoyance that I inflict upon him all the time. And I'm like, hi, K-pop this, K-pop that. Have you listened to this Shiny song? Anyway, everybody should listen to Shiny. This is just my hot take. It doesn't matter if you like K-pop or not. If you have an opinion, and it's okay if you don't, if you had to choose a song from the album that you best felt represents Elzar Man in this book, do you have a song that you would choose? This is my silly, very self-indulgent question.
I am pulling up the album right now.
You're like, I listened to this album twice and to 2023, never again.
No, I actually really like Shiny. They're probably my favorite K-pop band, actually. And gosh, okay, this one, I'm pretty sure when I tweeted that I was listening to Sweet Misery.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty sure that's what actually inspired it.
That
but
tracks.
I also think that The Feeling and Satellite and Hard are all good Elzar songs.
My thought, as I thought about it,
go ahead.
I was gonna say Satellite. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a like Elzar in a fairly decent place kind of song, like very like overarching Elzar song, not suffering necessarily Elzar song.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for responding to my very self-indulgent.
Absolutely.
I'm very serious about this album. I do have it right here.
Yeah, she's been holding that one in for a full year, so I'm glad we finally got the answer.
Like a Therese,
yes.
Sarah.
Me too.
But it will come up again on our discussion episode, I'm sure. There's always a way for more K-pop on the Star Wars podcast. I trust me. But I love it. Never change. But speaking of Elzar, and I think this is a great place to maybe transition into our spoiler section of the episode. So if you haven't read the book, this might be where you want to tune out. So all things are on the table, Tessa. Feel free to dive into whatever. But starting with Elzar, we're going to go to another tweet. We're pulling up all the receipts for everybody who was involved in the making of this novel. But you mentioned Tom Holler earlier. We're big fans of Tom on the pod. We're always talking with him at conventions, and he tweeted in September an out of context editorial note saying, "This is the most Elzar Man thing Elzar Man could ever do without losing his pants." And I thought that was the funniest tweet I've ever read because, one, objectively hilarious. Elzar Man loses his pants at one point in the High Republic. It's just fascinating stuff. But I'm glad somebody acknowledged it. But in this book, I don't know whether that was about temptation or trials or whatever, but what do you feel is the most Elzar man thing that Elzar does in this book, in Temptation of the Force?
Oh gosh. I would have to go between two things. One of them being when Avar finally like fully confesses to him, like he basically gets what he's wanted since he was 15. He's like, this is too much, goodbye, and please. That, and also I bet this is what Tom was referring to. But when Elzar essentially asks Grandmaster Yoda for permission to kiss his girlfriend. Tom really, really, really liked that scene for a lot of reasons, but partly because it was hilarious. And Elzar is just like, I guess I'll ask someone. I can't figure this out, which is the good side of Elzar. You know, he finally was like, I can't figure this out on my own. And people have helped me in the past. So Orla's not around. I guess I'll ask Yoda. So I think those two things are like two very, very Elzar things, but kind of like his worst and best instincts.
Yoda has really seen so much in his 800 years. You know, by the time Luke is like, who did you mean? There is another. Yoda's like, dude, I'm out. I'm done. I've had too many people ask me questions.
He's like, one time a grown man asked me if I could actually be in love with my girlfriend. Like, is that okay?
Right. A grown man. That's why I lost all my hair.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, last time Elzar man kissed a woman, he woke up the next morning and the city of Vala was under attack. So I think it's fair. And I'm glad he asked this time around just to make sure it was okay. So
just
you can never be too careful in Star Wars.
Yeah,
very chaotic of him. And continuing our love for Elzar and the Elzar trend, he's definitely bringing like a lot of guilt into the story, as teased at the end of Defy the Storm. A lot that he's grappling with, and of course his desire and love for Avar after she returns. And in the spirit of like Phase 3 being called Trials of the Jedi, how would you kind of characterize where he's at in this book? And will he ever accomplish not being his own worst critic? That's not a real question, because
I do think that Vernestra is his worst critic. But I think that for Elzar, he has really always grappled with boundaries. And, you know, it's something that he at times has been really good for him. You know, he's good at pushing those boundaries and thinking about the Force in ways that most Jedi don't think about the Force. And that allows him to solve problems and figure out new ways to use the Force for the light and all that kind of stuff. So he's good at pushing boundaries in a good direction, but he's also bad at recognizing the hardest boundaries. You know, I think that has a lot to do with how he views the Force, and the ocean does not have fixed boundaries. Not really. And not in the same way as a lot of other things have boundaries. And so I really think that is his biggest trial, is finding the boundaries that work for him without restricting him, both personally and with regards to the Force and his relationships and his place in the Jedi Order. And we really tried to encapsulate that with his decision about whether or not to join the council. You know, that was not my idea. I'd probably written like almost half of the book when we were at one of our meetings, our biweekly meetings, And somebody, I don't remember who, was like, we were talking about the empty seats on the council, like how we got to fill those, right? At some point, we need the whole council. And somebody was like, "Oh my God, should they offer Stellan's seat to Elzar?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna have to rewrite so much." Because I instantly thought, yes, actually, yes, I need that to happen. That is the perfect way for me to show Elzar figuring some things out for himself. That it really has nothing to do with Avar at all. He needed an arc that was really about his own role, like I said, his own boundaries, where he sees himself, what he's afraid of, and all those kind of things, especially after the trauma that George put him through in Eye of Darkness with regards to the storm wall in particular. And so that, was his biggest hurdle. And his initial reasons for being like, I can't do this. Why would they even offer me this? Had everything to do with guilt, not just about what he did to Chansey, but also a longer guilt about Stellan and, going even farther back than Stellan's death, but, their relationship and, how he was the last of the three of them to become a master. And, all those kind of hangups that he had. So, yeah, those are just some of the, surface issues Elzar has.
He's thinking a lot. He has a lot of big thoughts and big feelings about the things that are just going on in his life, for sure.
A messy man, but I love him, all the more for it. Yeah. He's just like me. Mess. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But in all seriousness, no, I think there's a lot of tenderness with the love between Avar and Elzar throughout the story. I think it was really beautiful how chapter 36, I think, is a standout for this book. It's that moment of, Avar grabbing his hand, let's go to the balcony. I'm like, this isn't going to end well for either of them. I mean, it will, but it won't, and I was like, this is what I've been waiting for since January 2021. But this real beautiful moment between them where they're kind of grappling with the doctrine of the Jedi, which has its very set of written rules about attachments. And there's those social norms that really is the hang up for them, and really truly embracing the love that they've felt for so long with each other. But this moment where Avar gives this impassioned speech about love being limitless, just like the Force. And I thought that was just chef's kiss. Love can ignite the stars. Love is all around us in Star Wars, whether it's familial or romantic. What was it like crafting that tenderness? Not so much something driven by just pure passion and crave, but actually a deep respect for one another, and a level of understanding that is almost star-crossed.
So that speech, essentially, Avar loves to give a speech. And that speech was one of the first things that I actually wrote down when I was developing Temptation. Not the whole thing, but the core of it. What she says about love expands the galaxy and attachment constricts the galaxy. And that's the difference. And that's why love and the Force are the same, are on the same side, because the Force is expansive. That idea was when I finally, when I was in my brainstorming and developing, how am I going to do this? What am I even trying to do? Once I had that realization and I knew those words, and I knew they were something that Avar would be able to say based on her previous experiences, I was like, okay, well, I really have to build up to that because, even when she says it, Elzar needs time to really absorb it. And so it's not like she could just in chapter 1 be like, by the way, man, I love you, because that would have been a disaster. And she knows him well enough. So it really, I was taking my cues from my understanding of Avar's personality, and also the fact that they've been friends since they were maybe younger than 15. I don't think there's an actual age on when the three of them met and became friends. If there is, someone tell me. Um, but at least since they were Padawans. Um, and they were friends, very good friends, all three of them. And then Avar and Elzar had their own friendship, the way they both had individual friendships with Stellan. And so the love, that friendship and camaraderie and partnership, which can be, but doesn't have to be romantic or sexual at all, is really how Avar essentially seduces Elzar in this book, is with friendship and, affection where, this is such a deep connection we have. If this is all we ever have, that's all we ever need to have, because I love you and I'm satisfied with you as you are and us as we are. And she needed to convince him of that without saying that. And so I think that's where their character interactions, leading up to her big confession about love and the Force, and what she actually wants from them, that's where all of that came from. That the trajectory of their conversations and the way that particularly Avar begins showing more and more subtle affection for him. It was all leading to that speech so that I could write that speech and know that I earned it.
It's so wonderful to watch it unfold in this book because we kind of know their history, and because Elzar is also this character who we've seen struggle so much with his own acceptance of himself and his own push and pull in his mind. And so for Avar to be like, no, I accept you, and what we have is important to me no matter what it is. Like, this is what I would like it to be, but this is, I just care about you. And I think that acceptance was really powerful for both of them, allowing kind of both of them to grow in that as the book then goes on. And then we get towards the end where they connect using the Force, and we're talking about fear and love and how those things, ultimately are powering them together among the Jedi, which was so good. But kind of speaking of what they're powering each other up with each other against, the Blight introduced in Defy the Storm really freaked me out in Defy. I was like, oh,
great.
That's scary, actually. I'm concerned. And man, it didn't stop in this book. That's for sure. We also see the return of the Drengir. I feel like in phase 1, we were like, oh, where'd the Drengir go? I wonder where they're at. Well, they're back. Kind of. Because they're not doing so well. Poor Drengir. And this is a bit of a silly question, but it's followed up with a serious question. And with the Blight kind of being this, new scary Force foe for not only our heroes, but the galaxy's civilians, especially in the hands of a Marchion Ro, who, seems to be wanting to use and manipulate that power for his own ends. But, also the Nihil and the not the Nihil and the Drengir, the Nameless and the Drengir. I have read this book. I have read all the books. Would it be fair to suggest that the Nameless and the Drengir have potentially never done anything wrong themselves? That is my silly question.
Well, the Drengir have done a lot of things wrong.
Well, yes.
They possess people through the dark side. They eat poor little innocent creatures. But I will hands down agree that the Nameless have never done anything wrong in their lives. They are perfect little creatures and they deserve to be snuggled. And it's just too bad the Jedi cannot do that.
I think that we should not judge a book by its cover. In this case, the Nihil by their, or not, I keep saying the Nihil, it's the ends. The Nameless by their very fearful vibe. They're really just snuggly little guys who deserve some love and some food, but not in the form of Jedi, perhaps.
Yes.
The serious
Yes.
follow-up question is, having Belle and Burry kind of be the witnesses to this threat of the blight, and seeing the interaction between the Drengir and the blight in this book really illuminates the differences between life and nature, and Marcian's desire for control and his desire for chaos at the same time. What characteristics of Belle and Burryaga did you lean on and pull from when having them encounter the blight and the Drengir?
For Burry, I really wanted Burry as a point of view character, partly because nobody else was doing it. And partly because I really wanted his not only like empathic point of view, but his connection to nature, because of how he sees the Force as a tree, as a forest, and knowing that the blight is like the best metaphor for the blight is that it is a destroyer of forests, so like eats all life. And so I really wanted that. And I do think that he, and possibly all Wookiees, but Burry is actually very secretly the most stubborn character in the High Republic. No, I'm not sure anybody else could have survived in that cave under the ocean, tearing out his own hair and sending out, his little distress signals the way that he did. And he did it because he's stubborn. And the blight isn't stubborn because it's not sentient, but it has that like relentlessness, unstoppableness. And so I really wanted Burry to be the one to face that, and to be able to not quite understand it, but at least relate enough to it that he can put words to what the blight is, even if he doesn't actually know what the blight is. And Belle, my favorite thing about Belle is his loyalty. I do sometimes worry it veers a little bit close to attachment, but so far he's doing okay. And I really say that because it seems to me like he has sort of not switched his loyalty from Loden to Burry, because he still obviously feels loyalty to his poor husked master. But in a way, I think that Belle needs a person or an ideal to be loyal to like be a partner. Belle is the kind of person who needs a partner, which is probably one of the reasons he has a dog. That's a big part of Ember's personality too, is loyalty. And so that was a much more subtle and less overt part of bringing Belle in, but that is what I had in my head when I was writing about Belle. It was always from someone else's point of view, though, so I didn't really get a chance to dig into Belle from his point of view in this book.
Yeah, Burry's point of view was a much welcome addition. I think I've been waiting for that one for a while, and it did not disappoint. I think one of the chapters that struck me the most was when they're on Naboo, when they kill the Nameless. There's two Nameless that they get attacked by and end up dying, and Burry has that moment of recognition of like, I kind of feel bad for what we just did. And I hope a lot of people who read that kind of take that other approach of like, the Nameless are little baby uwus who I love them so much and they have never done anything wrong. And I think Burry is that character, which is funny enough because he's a character that doesn't speak basic, but maybe he's the one that he might have the most to say in a way. But speaking of Nameless and like Marcian, going back to him, he's really the driver of so much chaos in the galaxy. But somebody that has been haunting him, in phase 1 was his dad. And now in phase 3, Marta Rowe is that ghost that is following him everywhere. So what was it like to bring Marta back, who is a character you got to introduce in Path of Deceit, continue with in Tales of Light and Life, and now gets to interact with our big bad, who is also like her great great grandson?
Um, so I kept Marta a secret from everyone. She was not mentioned. There was none of those conversations were in my outlines. Um, it was really just like Markian investigates the blight. Markian investigates the blight more. Those kind of his outlines were very basic. And so I was always had this like, well, I'm writing this and I have to make it good so that even though everyone is surprised, they're going to be like, oh, but we have to keep this. This is great. But I was always a little bit like nervous about it. Like I was getting away with something when I was writing those. That's how I feel about the Evereni in general and Marta specifically. Like I put her into anything I could possibly put her into. And I do actually think that she would understand Markian in a way that his dad and grandma don't necessarily, because Marta is the one who like fell off this cliff first, like emotionally and everything. And she has, memories of other Evereni who think differently from her, who aren't obsessed with what her children and grandchildren were obsessed with. Probably her fault, but that stuff hasn't been written, so who knows? And so I was really interested in playing around with them interacting and also keeping in mind that it's all in Markian's head ultimately. Like it's not really Marta, it's not really a ghost with her own choices. It's it's in Markian's head, and he does have he knows what her voice sounds like. He knows what she looks like because she recorded a bunch of like probably pretty wild nonsense journals for him. And as she was descending into darkness, so he knows how weird she can be and how impassioned and mercurial. But it was really fun playing with that idea of what do I want Marta to do and say, and what is Markian's like subconscious making Marta do and say, and when, and how can I use her to actually show his leaps of genius? Because I do think that Markian has a very unique mind in how he makes connections, and a lot of really, really smart or like pattern seeing people who might like seem like geniuses because they can just see so many steps ahead of other people in different directions because they make these leaps that other people can't make. So using like Marta to sort of show the leaps that he's making, so the readers aren't just like, well, how does he know this? How does he guess this? How does he figure this out? Anyway, yeah. So she's kind of like a metaphor for his own like genius and madness and everything.
Which is interesting to the point of he's seeing it all in his head, but the people around Martian are like, what is he thinking? Like, what is he doing? How is he making those leaps? Like the things that the reader is knowing, the people around him don't. Some of the scenes
it
where
makes
he's
him scarier.
Yeah, exactly. Like when he's on the Gaze Electric and he's having that moment where everything around him is turning to dust and Marta is interacting with things in the environment. I'm like, dang, Tessa, drop the mic. Like that was so wild to me to like be visualizing that scene in my head, and just the way in which like Martian, like just what he is going through mentally and the conclusions that he comes to as a result, just so good. So I was really happy to see that continuation of Marta into the story.
Thank you. I enjoyed writing it.
Oh, Marta. I think about
Marta.
her a lot. We often like to ask, like if you could have any character talk to another character from Star Wars, what would you have them talk about? But if you could, it feels like a lot of characters in this book are going through a lot, a la Empire Strikes Back, and if you could sit down with any character from this book and give them a piece of advice, what would you tell them and why?
I'm torn between I just really want to give Burry a hug and be like, calm down. You don't have to carry all of this by yourself. Everybody wants to help you, and it's going to be okay. Even if, I personally know what may or may not actually going to be okay. But I would love to, he needs more comfort. More people need to take care of Burry. And also, I would like to tell Xylan to chill sometimes, even though I don't actually want him to, because as a writer, he is one of my favorite kind of characters to write because he has no chill. He's really good at pretending he has chill. But like, speaking of Marky and being terrifying, Xylan is probably the character who is most afraid of Marky and Ro. Like, specifically, this person is terrifying. Everything else we can deal with, but Marky and Ro, you cannot deal with. You just have to get away. So he could use some chill. He and Care would be happier if Xylan had more chill. They might be dead, but they'd be happier.
Well, I was just imagining if they had more chill that they would just be out of that situation. Because I don't want them. I don't want them dead,
It is a good point that Care actually doesn't have a lot of chill either. That is probably what makes them work so well. Their lack of chill goes in different directions, but Care can't sit still. No. So,
well, as we start to close out this episode, we've talked a lot about Jedi Wookiees, and we have to ask you, because we had the chance to see you and the rest of the Luminous authors at the Acolyte premiere at the end of May. So we'd just love to know, how was your experience getting to go to that premiere with the authors and sharing that experience together?
It was nuts. It happened so fast. We were on one of our calls and Charles brought up, he was like, Mike, have you heard anything more about whether or not we're going to get to go to the Acolyte premiere? And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? That hadn't even occurred to me. And I didn't do it on camera, but I was like silently freaking out inside at the idea that maybe they were going to invite us. And I try really hard not to get excited about things like that because most times authors don't get to do anything. They keep their writers corralled and isolated over here, away from everyone else. But we did get the invitation really like 8 days in advance or something. And so there was a wild 36 hours where we were like, oh my God, plane tickets. Oh my God, what do we wear? They told us to wear Star Wars chic. And I was just like, I don't know what that means. Where do we stay? Can we stay with our friend? Let's coordinate with Zoraida. And then we had to change all these other plans because, it was 8 days in advance. And so we had plans in our lives. And so it was really just absolutely nuts. But then once I walked onto the red carpet, with all the other writers, we met up beforehand so we could all kind of go as a cluster, like we're all these like ducklings following Mike around. I got really, really calm all of a sudden. And I was just in awe and excited and like, oh, this is happening. And you need to, calm is fine. No dissociation. You need to remember all of this because this is the kind of thing that is very likely to never happen again. And it certainly wouldn't happen like this. Disney really knows what they're doing when it comes to like extravaganzas and shows. And so they had so many cool, just things. And then the theater was beautiful. And it was just such an amazing time. I almost didn't even care if I was going to like the show because I was enjoying myself. And it was so cool to be there. I did like the show. I love duels and fight, like martial arts and watching like wuxia, which is essentially what the fights in this were. And it was so cool to see the Force being used as a direct weapon. It was awesome. I love that. That was my favorite thing. I haven't seen the third episode yet because I'm teaching all this week, but I assume it will be just as good.
I wrote 5 pages of notes on that episode yesterday, so I think you'll enjoy it. I was really engaged by the first 2 episodes, and this 3rd episode, I was like, oh, I have so much to say. I have so much to say. So I think you'll continue to enjoy it. But
excellent.
Well, Tessa, that's all we have for you. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show once again. But for our folks who want to read more from you and see what else is going on in the world of Tessa Gratton, where can they find you online, and what do you have coming up that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Sure. TessaGratton.com is my website, and that has links to like my newsletter, which is the best place to get like all the important information. I try to send it out once a month, but I don't always. And then I'm also on Instagram, Tessa.Gratton, and Twitter or X, whatever. Excuse me. And those are the places to contact me, to find me. And I have some secrets that I'm working on. And I also have an adult epic fantasy trilogy that the first book comes out sometime next year. I'm still revising it, and I'm really excited about it. It's called The Mercy Makers, and it's about sex and power and imperialism. And can you be a good guy when you are in charge of an evil system? Or, are you like, is everybody inherently bad when the structures in which you live and your culture is inherently bad? And how do you find love when everyone is a villain, sort of? Yeah. I'm still working on my pitch.
Well, I'm in.
I will take 20 copies.
Pre-ordered as soon as that's live. But that's a great reason for people to subscribe to your newsletter and follow you on socials because of the secrets that you've got, because those will be, of course, the first place where people can hear about them. We look forward to those things as well.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. This was delightful. I loved digging into the spoilers too. I haven't gotten to do that very much.
Yeah, it's always a good time. So thank you once again. It was seriously such a great time having you back. So until next time, though, Tessa, may the force be with you.
And also with you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this interview with Tessa Gratton. As a reminder, you can find us on all of our socials, as well as any podcast platform of your choice if you want to hear more from us in the future. We also have a deep dive discussion on Temptation of the Force coming very, very soon. And a huge shout out to all of our patrons who make this show happen. It means the world to us. So thank you all again for listening. And until next time, may the force be with you always.